Welcome, everyone. So nice to see you all popping in today. I, as always, have some folks from the more than human world I would like to introduce us to today, too, as you are all arriving. I'm not going to tell you who this one is this time. Let's see if anyone can guess this one. Any thoughts? Sounds a little bit like me trudging through the snow this morning. That is the sound of a wild pig in the Galapagos Island, on the island of Isabel, where it is probably really, really warm today. So welcome to pigs everywhere, especially wild pigs who are living free. Good afternoon and welcome to the Compassion Consortium. I'm Reverend Sarah Bowen, and I'm joined today by co-founders Victoria Moran and Reverend William Melton. And as always, Phil is navigating us through the Zoomosphere. In order to ensure that we don't have any kind of odd disruptions, we've turned off some of the Zoom functions, but we look forward to spending time with you later during fellowship. We meet for the Sunday service, usually on the fourth Sunday of every month. It's a little different this month, but usually on the fourth Sunday of the month. If you're new to us, welcome. We are an interfaith, interspiritual, and interspecies community. Interfaith means we welcome people of any spiritual or religious tradition or philosophy, path, system of meaning making, and we feature a diverse range within our programming. Today, we have Jewish and Christian influences, since we're joined by both Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter, lead pastor of the Loft at Westwood United Methodist Church, and Sara Eifler, a rabbinical student at ALEPH. You'll hear more about both of them and from both of them later in the service. Interspiritual means that we believe underneath all of these paths, there lies a commitment to three shared common values: peace, compassionate service, and love for all of the earth community. And finally, we are interspecies, which means we consider the lives of and the needs of the others that we share this planet with. At the beginning of each Sunday service, I usually offer an acknowledgement drawing our awareness to the humans and the other species who are indigenous to and often still currently present in whatever habitat I'm in. Today, I'd like to reflect on the habitat that we all share, planet Earth. According to the UN, there are over 476 million indigenous people living in 90 countries around the world, accounting for 6.2% of the global population. And they make up more than 5,000 distinct groups on this planet. As an entire species of humans, as of last month, there are more than 8 billion of us on this planet, which sounds like a big number, until we consider that we are 0.01% of life on Earth. Yes, folks, we are 0.01% of life on Earth. It's hard to tabulate how many life forms there are here, because many we have not yet met, and lucky for them, because sometimes when we meet folks, we don't share so well. So it's hard to know, but current estimates of species range between 5.3 million and 1 trillion. That's how hard it is for us to figure out how many different folks share this planet. But within those labeled categories, it's estimated there are at least 20 quintillion other than human animals on this planet, and uncountable other beings filled with life. Wow. It's not always easy for anyone living on this planet where the needs of one species or one group or one being conflict with those of another. We know this too well, don't we? So I'd like to make a comment that might seem provocative today in the midst of the experiences many of us are having daily in this planet when those needs and those wants and those desires conflict. I'd like us to take a moment to rest in the awareness that life is thriving and flourishing on this planet all around us. that traditional ecological knowledge is being heard in new places so we can help restore habitats, that laws that seek to protect at-risk people and other than humans are being passed, that red foxes frolic in the snow, that eastern gray squirrels jump from branch to branch, and Gila monsters soak up sun on hot rocks. The leaves of ginkgo trees flutter in the breeze, and barrel cactus hold tightly under precious water. I want to invite us to be abundantly grateful for the dirt or the rock far beneath our feet, the water in and around us, the air we are breathing, and the light of the sun that helps sustain it all. And for some of us, great gratitude for the lightness we may call divinity, or by some other name, that which we look to for spiritual support when it feels like we can't see the beauty around us. We can't see it amidst the suffering. So for our spiritual practice later today, we'll spend a few minutes resting together. Of course, resting in moments of awareness does not invalidate our sadness when we hear of the euthanasia of P22, who lost his life yesterday due to the hazards of being a mountain lion who lives on the edges of a habitat we humans call Los Angeles. But we can envision what a healthy life looks like for mountain lions. And that loss, coupled with our imagination, might remind us to drive carefully, to avoid leaving toxic substances in our garages and around our yards, and to try to mitigate the problems we cause by creating 10-lane superhighways that separate critical habitat. Taking time to celebrate flourishing around us doesn't negate our dismay when we read of the explosion of the world's largest fish tank in Berlin, leading to the death of 2 human animals and 1,500 fish. But taking time to hang out at the ocean with our family and friends around the holidays, just for a few hours, might remind us just where fish belong. Singing raucous holiday hits in our living room much louder than we should. Wait, okay, maybe that's just me. Maybe some of you. Much, much, much louder than we should. Doesn't mean at all that I am ignoring that China's 26-story pig skyscraper is ready to take the lives of 1 million pigs every year. And finally, taking a few hours or a full day to be with our families and friends and neighbors during the holidays, being sure to unplug from the heartbreak in our email and in our social media feeds, and taking a short break from our important advocacy work does not mean that we're oblivious to the suffering of myriad species, or the fact that more than 500,000 people in our country are without homes, 30% of those families with children. Over 12% of the world's human population is undernourished or straight up hungry today. Doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge that systems are busted, that racism and xenophobia and sexism and speciesism and all the damn isms, all the other ways of separation and power imbalances we have created are running rampant. Folks, we are part of a really big mess, entangled with every being and every life form and every element on this planet. But to shine our lights in the places that need to be illuminated, we need to have energy within us. In my experience, flashlights don't work very well without batteries. Solar panels rely on the sun. We light candles at Christmas to remind us how we can bring light to the world amidst depression and political turmoil. That's what Christmas was. Likewise, Hanukkah is a festival of light, reminding us of the power of rebellion and hopes of restoring what is lost. When I light my menorah tonight, well, actually 4 of them, but when I light one tonight, I will remember that light is not for reading or for cleaning my house, which it very much needs. The Jewish tradition tells me to look at that light, to remember what that light signifies, to rest in that light for just a few minutes, to recharge, to connect with that which I call by a lot of different names. When we get stuck in frustration and anger and cynicism, it is a key sign of trauma response, of empathetic distress. we are going to most effectively address planetary trauma, all of the stuff we are all working on, we have to celebrate the wins, recognize what's been achieved this year, find moments when we can rest and recharge so that we continue that work, bringing justice and peace to all the broken places on our planet. I hope you will accept this paradoxical invitation. I really hope so. Happy Hanukkah amidst the turmoil, and joy to this very, very freaking messy world. Over to you, William.
Now is the time during our service when we have the reading of our Tenets of Agreement, which are very important to us. They're found on our website, and we always read them at this point in the service. And our reader today is Dr. Jeff Feinman. And Dr. Jeff graduated as a university scholar with molecular biology and veterinary degrees from the University of Pennsylvania in 1985. And his current focus is sharing actions that pet parents can use to help animal quality of life via his Holistic Actions online platform. So, Dr. Jeff, please go ahead.
We acknowledge a divine force at the heart of the universe and in all living beings. You may refer to this force as God, but it is known by many names and appears in different forms or as formless. We recognize the common moral principles inherent within all wisdom traditions. We affirm that compassion, reverence for life, and nonviolence are fundamental to religious faith, moral philosophy, and are to be extended to all sentient beings. We stand by the principles of inclusion, diversity, and equality, and hold those essential in our human relations. We hold that non-human animals are imbued with the same essence of life and love as our human animals, and there is moral parity between us. We avow that humans do not own the earth, its resources, or its inhabitants, but instead must be involved in their protection and care. We endeavor to eat and live in a kind and sustainable manner, moving away from animal foods and animal-derived clothing, as well as many activities that can cause harm to our fellow beings, human or otherwise. We aim to provide spiritual comfort, fellowship, and food for thought to those practicing or exploring a vegan lifestyle. We offer guidance and peer support for all those seeking a more compassionate and spiritual life. We commit to sharing these principles freely, with humility and respect, in support of all non-human animals and the earth.
Thank you, Dr. Jeff. Thank you very much. And now is the time when we play our Song of Compassion. And it's a great one today. It's called This Little Light of Mine. So this is the season of lights and candles for several religions. And we are playing the song in celebration of those lights and candles. This was originally a gospel song of unknown origin, reportedly written for children in the 1920s. It became a civil rights anthem in the 1960s, and today it is sung around the world and was chosen by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle to close their wedding in 2018, and it doesn't get any better than that. So this version is sung by Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who is often referred to as the original soul sister and the godmother of rock and roll.
And that's some joy for the world right there. Thank you, William. So, from light that is joyous and played by brass and a woman who can play the hell out of a guitar, we move into meditation, perhaps the other side of light, a different way of looking at light. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to invite you all to rest with me for a couple minutes. I'm going to invite you down deep under the ocean. So the idea is this: I'm going to play you about a 5-minute video. And I'm going to ask you to try to breathe while you're underwater. Richard Rohr has a beautiful, beautiful book called Breathing Underwater. The idea of how it feels sometimes when we feel like we can't breathe. And then we remember that we can breathe underwater. We might need some scuba gear. We can breathe underwater. So as this video starts playing, just take a few deep breaths, attune to the sound of the ocean. And don't do anything else except for rest and breathe. Whether we are resting in God, or we are resting in consciousness, or we are resting on the darn sofa, we need to rest. That was 5 minutes. To some of you, it may have felt like an eternity because you have not stopped in hours or days or weeks or months. It's an invitation to rest. And now, Victoria, we will unrest and hand it over to you.
That was beautiful, Reverend Sara. I have tried snorkeling twice and almost drowned both times. So I need to do it this way. It was so stress-free and beautiful. Thank you. It is my pleasure now to introduce our special spiritual guest for the day, Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter. And Reverend Sara introduced him a little bit. You read about him before you signed up. In addition to many other things, he is Associate Professor of Theology at the University of San Diego. His areas of research and emphasis have included Black womanist and environmental ethics, with a focus on race, food, and non-human animals. And he is the author of a dazzler of a book. Oh, you've got to write this down, and maybe you can link to it, Reverend Sara, The Spirit of Soul Food. Ooh, there is so much to that. Wonderful, wonderful book. Reverend Christopher Carter, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Oh, it's wonderful, wonderful to have you. So let us jump in our tiny little short amount of time. I always feel like I need to talk fast like a New Yorker to get through what I want to get through with fascinating people like yourself. So give us the personal introduction, not the CV, but who you are from the inside out.
Oh, man. I would say, I'm a kid from Michigan with roots in the South. My family immigrated from Michigan and Louisiana, but I grew up in Michigan and the Midwest. And I think that kind of beltway that we used to travel every summer going down south to visit our family is really deeply a part of my identity. I identify with so much of the kind of work ethic of farm people, because that's where my family is up there in the Midwest, but also the kind of relationship, patience, and love and community building that I got from my family in the South. And I think those really kind of live within me. And if I was to say anything about where I am right now, is I'm a husband and a father. I have a 3-year-old son, and that takes up whatever energy I have left. I should say he gets the first dibs of all my energy, and then whatever I have left kind of gets spread in other things. And so I really am enjoying being a parent and finding so many things I've learned with the compassion practice and the work I do with compassion, as you will know. Honestly, it's probably helped me most with parenting than almost anything else in my life right now.
So we always like in December to invite someone who comes from the Christian tradition, because Christmas, certainly in the US and Europe, is a really big deal for people who practice it with a religious intent or otherwise. And it's so interesting to me every year to think about Christianity and what it really means. So we know that there's Dr. King Christianity and Bishop Tutu Christianity, but there's KKK Christianity. And I know from studying religions that all of them have the basic, the essence, the beauty, and then some things that happen otherwise. But it seems to me, coming from the Christian tradition, that it just has so much of that. So how can one teaching be used for love and hate and so much in between?
Man, that's such a great question. I think so much of it revolves around power and how people use religion or any other kind of beliefs to justify the controlling of power. I always define Christianity, and I would actually say, when people ask me what I practice, the quickest answer I give is, I follow the religious and spiritual teachings of Jesus, or the religion of Jesus is usually the answer that I give. And I say that because it pushes back at some of those assumptions about Christianity, because so much of it has been, I think, misused and appropriated in contemporary culture today, particularly among those on the more conservative side. Because in truth, I see Christianity as a spiritual path of radical compassion. Like, it is a spiritual path of radical compassion. Jesus was a colonized, subject of Roman Empire, and he's refining Judaism in his mind, right? Pushing back at some of those norms that have dehumanized his people and displaced his people, that has disempowered his people. And he presents this radical vision of love of God, of love of self, and love of neighbor that totally dismantles the boundaries that have been put in place to maintain this hierarchical sense of power. And so what happens is, once different religious traditions acquire power, then they start building those boundaries back up to preserve that power, rather than recognizing that so much of this tradition is about love and about acceptance and about dismantling those hierarchical oppressive boundaries. And so it's always that tension, right? I think it's, and again, I said I've been talking so much about parenting, it's on my mind a lot. It's that recognition that there is always going to be hierarchy, as in the parent-child relationship, but it ought not be oppressive, right? At its best, it ought not be oppressive. And I think, again, if you have a parent that's oppressing a child, I mean, that's abuse, and they take that child away for its own safety. And I think that kind of parallels my thinking about what it means to practice any religious tradition at its best.
Oh, that's beautiful. So talk to us a little bit about the intersectionality of injustice. I heard about this originally many years ago within the vegan and animal rights movement, and now I'm hearing about it every day on TV. And by now, I don't even know what it means. It's very confusing, and I think everybody that uses the word probably sees it differently. But you've got the Reverend Doctor going on, so you're going to be as good to ask as anybody and better than most.
Yeah, I think the importance of understanding intersectionality, I think it begins, and it's I think Reverend Sara actually touched on it in her beginning remarks about recognizing our interconnectedness with species beyond ourselves. And I think that as a framework helps us, I believe, at our best, understand intersectional oppressions, that there are certain reasonings and arguments, what we might call logics, that people are using to justify harming other people and harming non-human nature and harming animals. And so when I think about that question, or when I think about intersectional injustice, I'm really thinking about the ways in which you might have patriarchy, for instance, not only justify and marginalize women, right? Oppressive power of men over women, but also how that infiltrates in queer spaces in terms of how that folks who are non-gender conforming, and also how that therefore impacts people of color, right? Because there's another kind of racism they're experiencing. And so at its best, intersectionality is an invitation for us to see our common sacred worth, right? So if we start from the fundamental position that we have a common sacred worth, then I think it allows us to be open to the idea that when I harm another person, that in many ways I'm harming myself, right? And I think that kind of invitation to radical community is a foundational to understanding when you start talking about injustice from an intersectional perspective.
Wow, I'm going to meditate on that. Our common sacred worth. That's pretty spectacular. So broaden it a little bit more for us. How did the animals come into it for you?
Yeah, I mentioned a little bit, my family's from the South. And I should say part of my family. My mother's side of family is from Mississippi. My father's side of the family is from Louisiana, but they immigrated from Spain. And so I have this kind of dual perspective of colonizer and colonized that I write about in the book, that I'm always wrestling with, within me, because I have, Spanish ancestry, and what does that mean? And so for me, it really began with this recognition and awareness of the experience of my grandfather growing up working on plantations in Mississippi and Louisiana, and the experiences that I still see today in the fields when I'm driving on the 5, perhaps going to San Francisco, that I see on farms today with farm workers, and also the kind of dehumanization and animalization that my grandfather experienced. And so for me, it was a connection, it was connecting stories. Again, it's that interconnectedness of sacred worth. My grandfather would talk about the ways in which he was dehumanized, right? He talked about the ways in which people talked to him, the white people talked to him especially. And he talked about the how that to them, they were nothing more than an animal. Right. And for me, it wasn't till years later. I mean, I'm in grad school and I'm talking about anti-racism, I'm talking about liberation, and it begins to, like, I have this moment, quite honestly, where I understand that if I want to be morally consistent in my argument for the sacred worth of human beings, of Black people, of Blackness as such, then that the animal question, the question of the sacred worth of the animal was at play, because the very foundation of racial dehumanization begins with the animal. Like, the animal is the linchpin in the American structure of race, by arguing, and I would say particularly, you talk about anti-Semitism and anti-Black racism, is rooted in a kind of animalization, a dehumanization. And so for me, it was a convergence of connecting my grandfather's stories to my own particular experiences of racism, to the historical understanding of the construction of race. And it was profound, because this isn't, I mean, I'm one of the, there's not a lot of Black scholars that are also doing religion and ecology. And so I'm kind of in a little bit of the minority in that way, right? When I'm arguing that like racism is an ecological problem, right? Like, as much as it is a actual interpersonal problem, and that the ways in which we talk about, the exploitation of animals is also a racial problem, right? And so I'm drawing these connections and trying to pull these threads together. That for me, it was kind of like an aha moment, that in order to do justice to my own community, I had to take seriously the role of veganism and in the animals. And that's why if you read my social media or anything like that, it always says vegan for the people, because that's what brought me there. I love animals. My wife also is a veterinary oncologist, I should say. I love animals, but really it was about the ways in which animal agriculture and animal industry is tied to the logics of race that pushed me to take seriously the interconnectedness of the animal and the human.
Fascinating. This morning I was walking our new little dog we just adopted a week ago, little guy named Rupert, who came from a hoarding situation. So he's scared of everything. And two women were going into church and they were talking about, his cute little jacket and that. And they said to him, "Do you want to go to church?" And I said, "Well, he needs it because he's so scared. He's afraid to pee." And they said, "Well, thank you for rescuing him." And they said it with such conviction that I wanted to say, "What do you think of him? Do you believe he has a soul?" But of course, I didn't have the nerve. What do you think they would have said?
Oh, man, I think this is like the perpetual question that I receive as a clergy person after someone has a companion animal that passes away. Like, I think that's the moment where they start wrestling with the reality of mortality. And they probably, I don't know if they would have said anything. I think they would have been like, "Oh," but I can tell you what I would say, is that yes, like, a soul is this divine spark of life. So I would say anything that's alive in that sense has what we would call a soul, this idea of, again, what makes us come alive, makes us feel alive. I think the challenge we have within our own, the challenge we have is that we don't have the language always to describe what it is we know to be true. That affective dimension of interconnectedness, right? There isn't words to describe quite fully the ways in which we can connect to even each other, because a lot of this is what's embodied. Like, it really comes out in our own particular kind of physical expressions. There's an article, I know there's a link to my website on there that I will point y'all to if you're ever thinking about this, that I wrote, called Prophetic Labrador. And it's about the passing of my chocolate lab and how that really pushed me. Again, I'm a professional, man. Like, I read all this, but it pushed me to really take serious this question. And it forced me, it really helped me understand the expansion of the notion of community. And what's interesting is I've written lots of stuff and I've been able to go give lectures all the places. That article is probably the thing that's gotten cited the most, that I get the most emails about, because people find it in a moment of grief. And it's basically my eulogy for my dog. It is And he changed me, and hopefully I helped change him for the better too.
Oh, I relate to that from a loss we had recently of a dog. So let's talk a little bit about your book. Before that, I do want to invite everybody who's present, even though you're not able to chat among yourselves in the chat, you can chat to those of us who are on the platform, as it were. So if you want to just send something to me, Victoria Moran, a question for Dr. Carter, then I can be asking some of the things that you want to hear about too. But in the meantime, the Spirit of Soul Food. It is not a cookbook. Tell us what it is.
There's recipes in it, though. If
I
you want
know
to,
there are.
I know.
It's like one of those culinary novels.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think I'm gonna describe it as a culinary novel. So for me, when I had this realization, as you asked me, like, when did the animals come in? That happened for me in the time frame would have been like November, December of 2010. And at that point, I knew, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to be vegan. Like it was, and I was, and so I had to figure out what that looked like for me, because so I left my family back home in Michigan. I'm here with my wife. I'm at this school that's predominantly white. I'm already feeling very socially isolated, and food is one of the ways in which I still feel connected to my own community, right? Food is, for all of us, I think all of us, certain meals, have a story. They connect us, right? And so we eat these things. It reminds us, it takes us back to some place. And so I had to figure out, okay, how can I eat in a way that allows me to feel as I like a Black person, as I understood it from my own culture, my own background, and feel connected to my people. And so that's why, so literally the whole argument for the book is, what should soul food look like today, given the structural harms that are present in our food system and the structural harms that are present in the ecological system that supports our food system. And so I literally just wrote a book as I was trying to figure this out for myself. Like, how can I eat in ways that are in alignment with my values and also feel as though I'm still doing justice to my own community? And so for me, this was a theological journey. It was a social journey. It was a journey of identity. I talk about decolonization and the importance of recognizing the kinds of internalized racism that we all carry, the stereotypes that center around Black food and Black women, especially when it comes to cooking. And then what is it and what role Christianity has played in propping up a lot of those racialized, patriarchal, ableist myths, and then how we might dismantle those and build something new. And so the end of the book is an invitation to kind of think differently about food and how we eat. It's an invitation to practice veganism and eat in a way that I, again, argue is in alignment with our own particular kind of values. Each book, what I believe is for me, the beauty of the book is that compassion is everywhere. I start with compassion. Each chapter begins with compassion. Each chapter ends with compassion. Like, it's all about recognizing, again, our common sacred worth and recognizing that this is hard for people. Like the argument that we're making, this is going to be difficult and that we're all kind of struggling to find a way. And so I'm trying to, rather than judge and shame people, which I think vegans can often do, quite honestly, it's not about that. It's inviting people to be their best selves, to do the best that they can, inviting those of us who have the capacity to help change the environments so that other people can actually eat in the ways in which they want to. And so, yeah, that's what the book is about. I absolutely loved writing it, and I still actually even like reading portions of it. When I reread it, I'm like, man, this is pretty good. So that's a good feeling to have,
Yeah, that always, I think, helps when there's some spiritual input in a book, when you can read your own stuff and you think, wow, did I say that? It's a great feeling. So there are a couple of questions from the congregation. Sean says, for Dr. Carter, thanks for all you've done, for your time and for your perspective. What have been some responses from folks within the ecological, human-focused social justice and theological movements who are not vegan to your work, the responses to your work from them?
Sean, that's such a great question. It has been, broadly speaking, once the book has come out, it's been more positive. I would say before the book would come out, and I will present pieces of my argument. it would be much more, I mean, I'm not a confrontational person in that way, but there would definitely be more resistance. But I think as the book came out and people began to engage it and read it, and they could see, and honestly, I would say the secret ingredient of this, I don't know what phrase I want to use, is compassion. I think that's the piece that's so hard for me to like, you have to kind of, I couldn't include that in every lecture I gave, the details and the way I was inviting people to that. But I think it gave people space to be opened up. And I'm really vulnerable about my own history. And I think being vulnerable and talking about my own struggles and growing up food insecure and growing up poor and being on food stamps and being like not having enough to eat for many years of my life, it gave me a sense of credibility, I think, that I needed. But it's been, I would say, pretty positive within both the Black community, within the Christian community, and there are people who resisted parts of it, but a lot of them, they get the general argument. And the last thing I'll say really quick, because I won't talk too long, is surprisingly, I would say in rural communities, they're the ones who have been most, that surprised me in terms of how much they've liked it, because my grandfather was a migrant farmer. In my dreams, I would be a farmer. So it's very pro agriculture, and they get that. And a lot of people in those communities feel unseen, and that books, they are noticed in that book. I write about their perspectives, I quote them. And that is one of the coolest parts for me. It's feeling the love I get from farmers and farm workers.
Well, we've got at least two of them today with us, Karano and Kimmy, our wonderful veganic farmers out in British Columbia. You also have an invitation, Dr. Carter. This is from Hillary. She says, next time you are in Oakland, check out Solely Vegan, Souley. Is that a restaurant?
It sounds like it, and I'm definitely going to check it out.
Excellent. Good idea. So we are coming up in a week on a great big old day for Christians and many others. How do you celebrate Christmas?
So first, I'm usually working, so I have to say that. So there's a part of me that is at work. Like, I'm in the church right now. Like, I finished worship, we finished a couple of things, and I was like, well, I'm gonna sit in the worship hall and have this meeting. And so, which for me, I grew up going to church on Christmas. Like, to me, and it's about community. And so when I think about how I celebrate Christmas, it's about being a community, and it's about, like, honestly being like thankful for the relationships that I have and the relationships I've been able to cultivate. And hopeful for the new year, and thinking about how might we deepen those relationships in love. My grandparents were very religious, but not that kind of like conservative, like, religion, more like about how we lived our lives. And so they always talked about the importance of being grateful. And I think that's why they told so many stories about the suffering they experienced growing up, so that we could recognize how far they come and how far we can still go. And so for me, Christmas is really about like that kind of family, community, and that collective gratefulness, and then, visioning and hoping for the future.
Well, you also brought up New Year's, one of the many, this whole season. I love this. We got the solstice and got Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and Boxing Day and New Year's Eve and Kwanzaa, New Year's, it just, Epiphany. It's so great. It's like I'm kind of a holiday nut. And yet, as we enter this new year, there's always hope in a new year. And yet, just looking out at what we see is like, whoa, people are talking about extinction. There's just, it's a very heavy time in some ways. So how do we acknowledge that, but also bring that wonderful spirit of light into this year that's coming?
And that's so true. I think, the last few years, for me, I should say, as a person of color in America, has been really difficult. Like, it's been, and I have questioned what's in the best interest of my family, because of the Spanish ancestry I have options to not be here. And so yes, I'm gonna say that I understand this question, and just for you all to know, this is something I've thought about, and this is where I've settled on. It's the importance of the cultivation of hope, and for me, hope is not this. Hope is this midway point between a kind of like nihilism, this belief that no matter what I do, nothing's going to change, and it's kind of, well, we might say it's this reckless optimism that just assumes that everything is going to be okay, that, you know, everything goes according to God's plan, or that kind of language people might use. That to me isn't really hope. Hope is that midpoint where it comes to grips with like fear, quite honestly, like looking for and being aware of the future that I don't want gives me the courage to work for the future that I do want. And it's in that work that I find the hope, right? And it's seeing young people and older people, just people doing that work, right? That actually care about creating change today. That's where I get inspired, and that's where I find hope. Is there are people like yourselves, people, you know, that are actively trying to invite folks to another way of being in the world. Because I believe that at our core, in our essence, like we have a compassionate core as human beings, and we've had traumas that disconnect us from our compassionate core, right? So how can we meet people where they are, help them cultivate the self-compassion they need so that they can heal their own particular inner traumas, right? And actually be regrounded in the truth of who they are, so that they can live into the love that I think is really in all of us. And so for me, this is about that. That's where I find the hope. It's in the doing the work. It's in the inviting folks to their best selves and seeing people actually creating the world that we want.
Thank you. Bless you. Thank you for being so real, so committed, so compassionate, and so quotable. And I will pass it on now to Elaine Hutchison.
Hey, voila. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Today, I will be speaking with the three founders of the Compassion Consortium. If you don't know who they are, we'll do a brief introduction. Reverend William Melton, who has traveled an amazing path from atheism to becoming a minister and co-founder of the Compassion Consortium. Reverend Sara Bowen, founder and teacher of our animal chaplaincy training and author of a beautiful book. It honors how we mourn the passing of our animal family. And of course, Victoria Moran, author, yogi, vegan pioneer, a lifelong animal activist, and voice for the voiceless. So in addition to creating this wonderful organization, these remarkable folks inspire me with the way they live. And I think they have a lot of wisdom to share. So I wanted to ask each of them the question, what is the one thing that each of us can do today, right now, to make our world a more compassionate place? Reverend William, let's start with you.
You know, there's so many things that each of us can do in terms of extending compassion. I mean, the Compassion Consortium is all about extending the compassion that is hopefully extended to humans, but to extend it to non-human animals. And that latter part is very rare. And so we can volunteer at shelters, we can volunteer at sanctuaries, we can advocate, we can celebrate the concept of compassion in our churches, in our synagogues, and our mosques. We can spread the word. Personally, for me, what I need to do, what I want to do in 2023 is to focus on the growth and outreach of the Compassion Consortium. I want to extend this outreach to people that aren't really thinking about veganism, and they're not really thinking about compassion for animals. And so my goal, what I can do, is to expand our reach. And it's already started. I mean, we're participating in the Shelter Animal Reiki Association Conference in February. We're co-sponsoring the Vegan Wellness Conference with Pittsburgh Vegan Society, January 29th. We are participating in the UN World Interfaith Harmony Week celebration in March. We are co-sponsoring the Soul of Ahimsa retreat in June, and we're participating in the 2023 Parliament of World's Religions in Chicago. And this is our second year. And so that's my goal, is to take that base and even expand it further, because we really want to, well, reach the world. That's kind of a ridiculous thing to say, but we just want to reach so many people with this message of compassion for all living beings, humans and non-human animals. I ran on farther than I should. I'm sorry.
No, it's beautiful. I hope we do reach the world, Reverend William. I think it's a noble goal and one we can all honor. So, Reverend Sara, how about you?
So when I was trying to figure out how I was going to answer this, I got quiet, like I usually do, and asked for a little bit of inspiration. And I heard the wise sage Shel Silverstein call out to me. So I want to answer you in verse if I have about a minute and a half here. Okay, here's my answer. I'll give you the moral at the end of it. Sarah Cynthia Sylvia Stout would not take the garbage out. She'd wash the dishes and scrub the pans, cook the yams and spice the jams. And though her parents would scream and shout, she simply would not take the garbage out. So it piled up to the ceiling, coffee grounds, potato peelings, brown bananas and rotten peas, chunks of sour, dairy-free cottage cheese. It filled the can, it covered the floor, it cracked the windows and blocked the door, with prune pits, peach pits, and orange peels, gloppy glumps of cold oatmeals, pizza crust and withered greens, soggy beans and tangerines, crust of blackburn toast, overcooked bits of tofurkey roasts. The garbage rolled on down the halls, it raised the roof, it broke the walls. At last the garbage reached so high that it finally touched the sky, and none of her friends would come to play, and all of her neighbors moved away. And finally, Sarah Cynthia Stout said, okay, I'll take the garbage out. But then, of course, it was too late. The garbage reached across the state, from New York to the Golden Gate. And there in the garbage she did hate, poor Sarah met an awful fate that I cannot right now relate, because the hour is much too late. But children and adults and compassionists, remember Sarah Stout and always take the garbage out.
Oh, I love it. It's
The
beautiful.
reason this came to me, and the kicker is, we need to reduce the amount of trash that leaves our home. Much of what we think will be recycled is not recycled. Many vegan foods come, oh my God, so packaged. Trash and waste disproportionately affect neighborhoods of people of color and habitats of other than humans. So we need to take less garbage out. But
Love it. Thank you so much. Victoria, what about you?
Well, it's sure hard to follow Shel Silverstein, but I'm also going to follow with a quotation. And this comes from Peace Pilgrim. And I'm just going to put my gallery view on and ask if you could raise your regular human hand if you know who Peace Pilgrim was. Okay, yeah, a few people. Peace Pilgrim was an amazing woman who had a spiritual experience in the 1950s that we would never have world peace until we had inner peace. So she dedicated herself to walking until given shelter, fasting until given food, and having only the possessions that she could carry in the pockets of her tunic. She was vegetarian, vegan to the degree that she could be vegan, although she was living off people's charity, so she wasn't perfectly vegan, but she was a pretty perfect human being. And one of the things that she would always say is, live up to the highest light you have, then more light will be given to you. And I think that sometimes, especially for those of us who want to live a better life, who want to save the world, who want to make our mark for the good, we're just always feeling that we're falling short. And we want to do it as well as somebody else, or in the way that somebody else did it, or better or more. When if we really just live up to the light we have today, then we'll get some more and we can live up to that tomorrow. So that's my little Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, etc. blessing.
Well, thank you for that. I had to sit and take that in. I had to breathe that in for a minute. It is such a self-evident truth. And why didn't I think of that myself? To close, these wonderful people said, "Oh, Elaine, give your view too." I guess I'm just going to piggyback on what Thomas Wade Jackson said during our last service. I think one of the best things we can do to create a more compassionate world is to be compassionate with ourselves. We are so hard on ourselves. We can forgive others for wrongs done to us. We can forgive people for raping the environment. We can forgive murderers. We can forgive all sorts of people, but we find it so hard to forgive ourselves. And Rumi, the great Sufi poet, said, almost 800 years ago, he said, never give from the depths of your well, but from your overflow. And I think before we can save animals, we have to save ourselves. And part of that is forgiving ourselves for our past or whatever we think we've done wrong, and move wholly into the world with a glad heart, because I think we can do the most good for animals when we're healed ourselves, or as healed as we can be. And that's it. Basically, in closing, I would ask all of you to ask yourself that question: what can I do today to make the world a more compassionate place? And I think if we ask ourselves that question often enough, we'll get answers.
Thank you, Elaine. That is such a great question for fellowship today, for those of you who are going to hang out with us. It is now my great pleasure to invite someone else here into our crew to offer something today. And I have to say, I'm so delighted, because I was a pastor's kid raised in a church and at the Jewish Community Center, which explains why I have a menorah and a clergy collar on. And one of my biggest pains is when my birth religion, Christianity, is used in a way that suggests that Christianity, as if it's some sort of monolith, replaces Judaism as if that's some sort of monolith, rather than seeing that the sprouting of many types of Christianities came out of the political unrest when empires oppressed people who practiced a bunch of different Judaisms. That is so messy too. And so I'm particularly delighted that in this community, we can celebrate the beauty of two religious traditions as entangled, not in opposition and not in supersession. So it makes me even more delighted that we're both named Sara, which is a really good biblical name, isn't it, Sara? So let me introduce you all to Sara Eifler. Sara is the director of programming of Jewish Veg, a national nonprofit that, as an expression of Jewish values, builds community to encourage plant-based lifestyles through support, education, and celebration. She holds a BA from Brandeis University, and she is a current rabbinic student at ALEPH, which is the Alliance for Jewish Renewal. So she's going to be a rabbi. Sara believes in a Jewish ethic of responsibility and care towards animals and the earth, and is passionate about global food justice. That's a trend today. Sara, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Reverend Sara. Yes, it's a great name. And thank you all for having me here tonight. Happy Hanukkah, Chag Urim Sameach, happy Festival of Lights. Tonight is the first night of Hanukkah. And on Hanukkah, we celebrate a miracle that happened in our ancestors' time. And what I love about this story in particular is that the miracle that we're celebrating isn't one big grandiose moment. There's no parting of the seas, there's no fire raining down from heaven. The miracle of Hanukkah is that in the time of the temple, there was only enough oil to keep the menorah lit for one night. And yet somehow, miraculously, that oil lasts for a full 8 nights. which is just long enough to keep the light burning until the people are able to prepare more oil. So although it's a miracle, it's not only about the light, it's also about the time. That time that it takes to prepare ourselves, the time that it takes to give us the spaciousness that we need to do our work. And as you've heard from Reverend Sara, from Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter, from Victoria Moran, from everyone who's speaking tonight, we know as activists and as spiritual advocates, sustaining ourselves through this work takes work. The miracle of Hanukkah, a miracle of light and time, reminds us that to keep the light burning in ourselves, we must take the time to tend to what sustains us. That the only way we can bring light is to keep the light alive in us. So as we light the candles tonight, I invite you to reflect on what sustains you and what keeps your light shining. And I'm going to share my screen. If I can please have permission to share my screen. And we're gonna do 3 blessings tonight for the first night of Hanukkah. The first will be using the traditional masculine God language in the Hebrew, and the second will be using non-binary Hebrew and God language from the Non-Binary Hebrew Project, and the third will use feminine God language. And my amazing partner is going to help me out by lighting the candles. Ready? Yeah, well, you light it, I'll do it. All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the lights of Hanukkah. Bruche atah Elohimotenu malket haolam she'astanisim lakodmenu Bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. Blessed are you, Yah, our God, the sovereign of the world, who performed miracles for our ancestors in those days at this time. And since it's the first night, we also recite this prayer, the Shehechianu. Brucha at Yah, Makor HaChaim, Shehechianu v'kimatnu v'higiatnu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, God, the source of life, who kept us alive, sustained us, and brought us to this moment. And we are told to publicize the miracle of Hanukkah, the miracle of light. And so typically we keep the menorah, the Chanukiah, lit in the window. So we're going to keep it in the Zoom window so that we can see and appreciate its light. As we also move now to a prayer for healing, and I invite you at this time to put into the chat the names of all of those human, non-human, anyone and everyone in your life for whom you wish healing, that we can keep in our minds and our hearts as we recite a prayer. And I will give you a moment to put those in the chat. And with those names with us in our minds and our hearts, we recite, Rifa'enu Adonai v'nerafeh, Hoshienu v'nivashea ki tehilatenu atah, v'ha'aleh refuah shlema l'chol makotenu, ki el melech rofei ne'aman v'rachaman atah, Baruch atah Adonai, rofei cholei amo Yisrael, v'chol yoshvei tevel. Heal us, O God, and we shall be healed. Save us, and we shall be saved, for you are our praise. Bring complete healing to all our wounds, for you are God and sovereign, the faithful and merciful healer. Blessed are you, O God, who heals the sick of your people Israel and all who dwell on earth. And at this time, I again invite you to put into the chat the names of those who have passed in recent days or at this time in previous years. The prayer that we typically say for morning in Jewish spaces is called the Kaddish. That is a prayer that is a communal call and response, and it's meant to be said in community. So what I've brought for you tonight is the poetic translation or interpretation by Marge Piercy of that prayer called Kaddish. And again, we'll keep in our minds and our hearts all the names that are put into the chat. Look around us, search above us, below, behind. We stand in a great web of being joined together. Let us praise, let us love the life we are lent passing through us in the body of Israel and our own bodies. Let's say Amen. Time flows through us like water. The past and the dead speak through us. We breathe our children's children blessing. Blessed is the earth from which we grow. Blessed the life we are lent. Blessed the ones who teach us. Blessed the ones we teach. Blessed is the word that cannot say the glory that shines through us and remains to shine, flowing past distant suns on the way to forever. Let's say Amen. Blessed is the light, blessed is the darkness, but blessed above all else is peace, which bears the fruits of knowledge on strong branches. Let's say Amen. Peace that bears joy into the world, peace that enables love, peace over Israel everywhere. Blessed and holy is peace. Let's say Amen. And finally, I want to share with you this chant by Rabbi Shefa Gold. It's a very beautiful chant that my amazing partner is going to help me to offer to you tonight. This is from Exodus 15:2, the Song of the Sea, also found in Psalm 118:14, and it's in the Hebrew, Ozi v'zimrat Yah v'yehi li lishua, my strength and the song of God will be my salvation. And because I am not sure how to do original share while also sharing, I'm going to stop sharing. Ready? Ozi v'zimrat Yah v'yehi li lishua. 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 May our strength and the song of God carry us all through this time and bring us light and life for us and for all beings. Amen.
Sara, thank you. Thank you both. Beautiful, beautiful. I think we will dispense of the final prayer that we usually offer. I think that I can add no additional more beautiful words than what you have just said. Thank you for joining us. William, over to you for some announcements. Thank you,
Yes.
everyone, for joining us at the Compassion Consortium Sunday service.
Yes, I would like to echo that. I am so grateful for all who participated and contributed today. And I'm so thankful for all of you who have joined us. And now I'm just going to let you know about a few upcoming events. Tomorrow night, on December 19th, we have our engaged members gathering, which we do once a month. And Reverend Sara will be leading us in an interspecies menorah lighting and meditation on dedication. Then on our January service, our spiritual guest will be Tavoria Callum, a vegan follower of the Baha'i faith, and we will be exploring her journey from being an atheist and a communist to her becoming a member of the Baha'i faith and its intersection with veganism. On Sunday afternoon, January 29th, we will co-sponsor with the Pittsburgh Vegan Society a vegan wellness conference featuring speakers and panel discussions on a variety of topics. Victoria and I, and also Lisa Levinson and Judy Carmen from the Interfaith Vegan Coalition, will be participating in this. And then lastly, if you have been looking for vegan love in all the wrong places, join us for our February book night at 8 p.m. February 9th, featuring Maya Gottfried, author of Vegan Love, Dating and Partnering for the Cruelty-Free Gal with Fashion, Makeup, and Wedding Tips. So if you did enjoy the service today and would like to support future Compassion Consortium programming, we'd encourage you to donate on our website, and I think Sara is posting the link in the chat. And then please don't forget to check out our membership program. All the details are on our website, again, at the link that Sara is posting in the chat. And I think that closes out our announcements about future events. So is it over to you, Victoria, now?
Yes, I am here first to let you in on something really special about Maya Gottfried. So even if you are not looking for love in all the wrong places, even if you have love in your life, I'll bet you'll want to come to this amazing event, because Maya is a veteran animal rights activist. She is an author of children's books and other works. But here's the coolest part. Her grandfather was the Cowardly Lion in The Wizard of Oz. Is that cool or what?
Thanks so much for joining us. The animals thank you, we thank you, and we hope to see you next time.